that's it.
That's clear. It's exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
But this is in.
Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's great.
Paco, why do you think it's been historically sort of unusual to merge flamenco and inside the modern classical repertoire?
The thing is that flamenco is really a folk tradition, which has evolved with the music that people had around them, you know, their custom, their songs, and it wasn't meant to be done with orchestra. It wasn't meant in the sense that its genesis is a free, you know, what people sing in their community, in their culture. So eventually, when flamenco has become a very sophisticated art, really, which it has, and particularly, I say particularly because the guitar part is what has frets, which can be identified as notes. The voice covers ranges that are so difficult to actually write, I think, and all that. But the guitar has developed, has a development, fantastic development over its history, and then has come out of that, of the actual, as I said, genesis, the actual what it was always an accompanying instrument to the song, also to the dance, because people dance to the music as well. So the guitar has opened the possibilities of actually orchestrating and doing, because it does chords as well, and those chords have evolved, have become more complex, more ambitious, brave and so on. So all that has taken place in the history of the music. So eventually, people think that perhaps they can do some orchestration and so on, but it's not the norm. So in answer to your question, really, if it has to start, or actually there is already some music, that some great guitarists have put down. They haven't written it themselves, because by absolutely the rule is that none of us actually is versed in writing music or reading music, but somebody writes ideas for them and so on. I mean, so some ideas have already been put down. What I have done is not orchestral. I've done just a little contribution in terms of choir, because I've been asked to do certain things, and I've done them in that way. But I needed somebody to do the orchestration for me, with me. But so what I'm trying to get at is that when you ask why hasn't, the point is that if it hasn't, it could. It can begin now. Already, as I say, some pieces have been written for orchestra, perhaps not that many, but the point is that there is no barrier against that. But the nature of flamenco is that it has evolved in itself dramatically. It has expanded, assimilating messages from other musical cultures, which then they become, if they are accepted by the tradition of flamenco, then they take part in the development, its own development. So that is the way the music has evolved. It wasn't orchestral. If it has to be, or if the imagination of artists decides that they want to do that, it's free and it will happen. So I don't have an answer, I'm afraid, but that is the background for why. Well, the music comes from where it comes. Almost illiterate people, but people very immersed in their conditions, their culture, in terms of, culture includes exploitation, difficult conditions of life, and tragedy, and happiness in the extreme. So all those things people express with the basic elements: clapping, the voice, the human voice, and the guitar, which was the instrument anyway of Spain in many, many parts. So cheap, easy, but in a way creating the basis for an art which has grown tremendously and has many, many possibilities. And I'm delighted that you are interested in that subject, because perhaps you can write things, and perhaps other people can also write things. I'm honored that, because obviously it is my culture, and anything that is actually good, that doesn't knock the essence of the music, of flamenco music, is absolutely welcome, will be part of it. So there's the field, you can
Thank you.
walk on it.
That's a wonderful answer. For a lot of people who are writing out music, how do you lay a sort of platform in which improvisation and spontaneity is not lost, as you're saying? It's not, it's really difficult to guess where and how to create the right nuance and space in order that a person can feel free enough to express themselves without being inhibited by maybe a form that they don't like, or is kind of infringing on their ability to improvise and communicate. I'm really interested in that as well. What do you think about that?
But you're asking in the context of an orchestral piece, presumably, because in fact we're not bound. We are bound by rhythms which are very strict and very precise and very what is the word? Kind of inspiring. Sort of they're so demanding in a way, but and so essential that you keep the beat where it belongs, because it's quite strict in that way. So that is what we deal with in terms of doing improvisation, obviously in the cadences that you know, which is very common in flamenco, and sort of the basic harmonies that we have, you know, with those cadences. So that's what we deal with. But then the idea is that the beat is very clear, very precise, but actually we avoid making it precise.
Well, that's one of the things that I really discovered when I was listening, because those are the kinds of things that I was hearing, but I couldn't understand exactly where they are, because they're sort of like
But you see, the point is that it is established. If you play a falsetta, a falsetta in flamenco is like a musical interlude between one perhaps a rhythmical part or a singing part or whatever. A falsetta is basically units that make up a piece in flamenco. If you think of that falsetta, it has a definition. It has something that you can write, but actually, the falsetta can change every time you play it. And then you avoid, as I said, you know, being obvious with the rhythm only to become absolutely obvious on the next moment when you choose. So that flexibility can always be there, and it is welcome. That flamenco actually thrives on that, because it adds. It's like the jazz, the blues, bending the notes, you know, and also avoid rhythmically also. Having an expedition into some other area. So certainly that is what happens in flamenco. So the falsetta, the piece, whatever you decide, can be written. It can be written, but actually in playing it, you avoid playing it as it is written. You know, essentially you're playing what is written, but you want to make it expressive. And the way you feel at that moment is the expression you're going to imbue into the notes. So that freedom, that is what flamenco is, and that is where it's evolved from. So being orchestral really is a mystery to me. I have no idea how that can be applied to that big beast like an orchestra, obviously. But I suppose the clashing harmonies and sometimes happen in the way we use the guitar, and that in a way suggests, I suppose, to composers ways in which that spirit can be reproduced, and actually maybe they can lead the instrumentalists to actually express in that way. But it's something that's a mystery to me. I cannot actually talk with any sense, with any conviction or authority about that discipline. instruments get invented, now so much is invented, to actually depict those expeditions away from the obvious that we use in flamenco such a lot. Well, that would be wonderful, because then you can just write it for the orchestra or for the instrument that is playing at that time. But at the moment, we cannot play the same notes, and then you probably have the same problem with an orchestra, with the actual arrangement that you've made for the orchestra. But as I say, it's not my field, and it's very difficult for me to give a proper answer to that.
Usually when I'm writing for other people who are improvising, I wouldn't expect to write out the falsetto. I would leave the space there for the falsetto. But the problem for me was to figure out exactly, because of the orchestral environment, you're not getting this sort of natural call and response that you would get with live players.
The only thing I have to say about that is that the rhythm is, we play in compass, in rhythm, and it is very expressive and necessary to actually have the gift of doing that with expression. So we are rhythmical, very rhythmical, but the thing is that you have to actually translate that into the vocabulary of the orchestra. It's inevitable. If you are going to leave a space, you have to leave a space which I understand, that I am familiar with, and then I will do, whatever I can at that moment, so for the orchestra to come back in. But so that space is also, I'm actually trying to say that really that is possible to do, and that is something that you have, and that compass. I mean, we can actually study it a little more in detail in another situation, but I can point out actually where the notes must go, where the beat must go, so that it is recognizable by myself and anybody who is reading it. And then in there, I will do perhaps not strictly what you write, but I can deal with that, and flamenco artists will deal with that. Because we measure very, very, very strongly what we do. That's our discipline.
my research, I read a lot about how important the creative element is for the artists, flamenco artists, and how people like Paco de Lucia have really stood out from other people because of what they've done, in terms of making something that might be typically flamenco, but maybe putting something in that's kind of never been done before, but then for some reason it fits, and then the next thing you know, you're changing maybe a sort of a small little thing in the development of flamenco. So I was interested in that. How important is the creative thing for you, and what does it mean to you in terms of flamenco music?
Well, the first thing to say is that Paco de Lucia is an utter genius. There is no boundary to where his imagination was able to go. And I mean, sadly, we lost him a few years ago. But the thing is that there have been other geniuses before him. Ramon Montoya actually was a wonderful, the beginning of the 20th century, all that time was a very fertile, wonderful moment because Ramon Montoya was alive, because he actually, taking the guitar to many other guitarists were good, accompanying the song, which was really what flamenco represents, is the song and the dance, as I say, but fundamentally the song. To accompany, they provided the right materials, very good, but Ramon Montoya thought much further. So he actually created so many new techniques. He discovered what is not stated but implied in a turn of voice, and actually put a chord or harmony somewhere there, which up to that moment it was not there. So, but he did many things, technical, new techniques. So he actually made the guitar grow tremendously. So inspiration comes from that for other young guitarists at that time when he was mature. And those young guitarists, they've seen the light in that, so they add their thing. And some of them, like Nino Ricardo, was a fantastic, wonderful guitarist when I was growing up, who did that, but also he added something more, because Ramon Montoya was absolutely wonderful, lyrical, classical almost, but very flamenco. But Nino Ricardo was strict with the rhythm in a way that Montoya wasn't. But it doesn't matter. I mean, he was of his time, but also the passion that Nino Ricardo put into playing. I mean, he didn't actually care to play badly in terms of technical prowess, but he had it. He had prowess anyway. But the passion was more important. So that is another lesson that was accumulated in the repertoire, in the whole development of the music. So he was my hero at that time. Then appeared, I mean, there were many others, wonderful guitarists. Then appeared a guy that was living in America. And in fact, we didn't know anything about him. He was a gypsy. Ramon Montoya was also a gypsy, not Nino Ricardo. But I mean, gypsies are very, very important in the development of flamenco, but that's another, we can comment some other time. But the thing is that Sabicas produced a record. I mean, he was living in America. He produced a record that came to Spain. He was doing concerts in America, solo. See, the point is, I think maybe we were talking before we started this discussion, but you were interested about the solo aspect. But the point is that he was playing solo, and he acquired a technique which was at that time unbelievable. It's an explosion happened when that record came to Spain. And then Sabicas was my hero too at that time, another genius. The point is that all that was assimilated during my development, my time that I've lived playing. Those three masters, wonderful masters, have been the body of flamenco guitar. plus many others, as I say. I can't dismiss many wonderful guitarists as well, but those were the really particular until this kid came about, which was, you know, you say Paco de Lucia, well, he took everything that Montoya had done, that Niño Ricardo had done, Sabicas was doing, he took all that, but he's honest, absolute honesty in seeing that flamenco could go further and using the elements that these other great masters have put at his disposal. And he had a fiendish technique. He just could do everything. But his imagination is what counts, his ideas. So, you rightly said, things get discovered, get brought into the music, and then they become part of the music, only if they are good. But his, all were good. All were good. The thing is that, inevitably, the big, what do you call those things where boats sort of go into the sea, these tremendous gates of flamenco music actually just opened, and they had opened partially
floodgates,
before.
yeah.
The floodgates, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then all the young people just,
went crazy.
so it was a revolution. When you ask me about the contribution, that was a revolution, never mind contribution, you see? And the point is that, I mean, we all learned from that, and some people, some younger people than me, obviously, took that, and of course that became el pan de cada día, which is your bread, your daily bread, you know. So that's where they are, and then, because it was the floodgates, then there were no limits to what can be done. So now, young guitarists are doing wonderful, fantastic harmonies, fantastic things, but only because that guy actually opened the door for them of their imagination, and you know, I mean, for some people it was too late. I mean, certainly people of my age, and so he just took the flamenco by himself. And if you ask any honest flamenco artist, they will say exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
There was nobody like him. So, coming back to your question, and more specifically, it's not adding. It was a complete revolution, and that revolution is, you know, is going in every direction still. So it was just a wonderful.
Because he did so many things, also with so many different
Absolutely,
styles,
absolutely.
and you know, you can
imagine
change the course. I think, yeah.
See,
a lot.
curiously, you're talking about orchestra, and what can be done, like with flamenco. Manuel de Falla didn't actually do flamenco in his compositions, but Manuel de Falla actually has, so long ago, I mean, he died in the 40s, I think. I forget now, I think it was in the 40s he died. So he was a very, very classical musician, but he took from flamenco so much expression, so much, the harmonies were tearing in the same way that the human voice and you know, had suggested to him. So there was ambition, even then there was ambition to actually make an orchestra sound flamenco, but he didn't do flamenco as such.
Yeah.
He did popular songs. Well, he recovered from the folklore popular songs, imbuing them with flamenco qualities because he had that ability, but he didn't do flamenco as such. But it's only one step, you know, further that one has to go, because a lot of his harmony, a lot of his music had that ambition to move, to tear the fibers, you know. And so it's not a million miles from what, you know, if somebody looks at Falla for orchestra, I mean, you have to also look at flamenco and establish the rhythms and the writings and the songs, etc. All that. But that would be a good beginning to you know, to sort of I think, some of it anyway.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. What has been your kind of like driven path for you personally in flamenco music? And you know, I understand that you did many years of solo music, and then you went back to playing with a complete form, dancers, vocalists, everyone, the whole troupe. And why have you kind of gone in that direction? And what attracts you to it, and what's been your sort of driving force in flamenco music and your artistic?
That
Yeah.
is my driving force. I mean, the point is that that's where I belong. You see, I was never set on becoming a soloist. I'm too shy. You know, I'm not a front person. But you know, I mean, I say that, but I can stand by myself. You know, but I was never. It was never my ambition. I was so happy, actually contributing to the creation of flamenco, which is not just one person, but the singing is just the most wonderful thing. And to be able to be honored by people asking me to accompany them was just my life. That's what I wanted to do. Not only singers, but dancers as well, because the rhythm is critical, it's important. So that's where I belonged at that time. I don't mind saying we're friends anyway. Don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. But in a way, some of the artists that I worked with disappointed me, you know, in human terms. And I was young and sensitive. And I had been to London. I mean, I was conscious of the flamenco solo because Sabicas was, as I say, a revolution in his time. But I was in London with a company, and they asked me to play solo in the show. I says, what? So I played solo, but of course I could play. I mean, every guitarist wants to play pieces, but to have a solo career was not my idea. But so they asked me to play, and it went so well. It was in my mind. So in this thing I said, you know, being disappointed a bit, it made me rethink my life. My life was a bit superficial because I was in the playing for tourists and kind of making easy money and having nothing else, and, you know, in the coast, not doing much work really in terms of developing my own self. So I decided to change. I was going to come to London and to start a solo career, try to start a solo career. As I say, against my better nature, because I didn't like that particularly. But I love flamenco, you see. I always projected flamenco in the most authentic way that I could from my tradition. Obviously, trying to do it in my own way. But it was my tradition I was presenting. And that was successful. And it was fine. So I played for many years. I have thousands of concerts just on my own. Fine. But I went back to my tradition, to what I liked doing, because I then have popularity. I could do it. I could actually hire people I loved and liked,
wonderful, yeah.
and put them on the stage with me, with my ideas and their contribution. So my idea ruled the thing, but I rested very strongly in the artistry that I had with me. But I was doing what I loved doing. So it couldn't be more clear. The answer to you is that I came back. It's not that I was a soloist and then decided to do bigger things with artists. No, that's where I belong. And I had an expedition to play solo, which I still do. I mean, I play solo all the time, sometimes. But I love making shows for the theater now, which I've done so many, but including all the aspects of flamenco. And that is my life.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Paco, it's been great. I'm so glad that you were able to answer those questions because they're very, but it's just such a great thing to have you tell me, what your experiences are and how, what it means to you and everything. It's just, it's a wonderful
Well, you're
opportunity.
You're very welcome.
Good.